Olá pessoal, tudo bem? Sejam bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Esportes 3.0, o seu programa semanal para saber tudo sobre os bastidores dos esportes, sobre os negócios e tudo que está acontecendo aqui no Brasil e no mundo também. E hoje, especificamente, a gente vai falar bastante de mundo, porque nós temos um convidado internacional, nosso primeiro episódio com um convidado internacional, e é por isso eu estou aqui fazendo a apresentação em português, mas o resto do programa todo vai ser em inglês. Eu acho muito legal, apesar de ter essa questão da barreira da língua, né, que algumas pessoas não vão conseguir acompanhar agora, mas vocês já fiquem sabendo que o VOD que a gente vai lançar essa semana vai ser com legendas também, para poder facilitar, mas a gente, claro, também vai ter o podcast que vai ser todo em inglês nessa rodada. Mas é super importante, a gente vê isso com muito bons olhos, porque apesar da gente ter muitos profissionais e muitos executivos com quem conversar aqui para contar muita coisa no Brasil, é muito legal a gente entender o que se passa lá fora, o que está se passando no mundo inteiro, e até mesmo a visão que o mundo tem do Brasil, de como estão os negócios e a questão de comunidade, como que realmente tudo isso é visto pelos olhos do mercado internacional. Então, gente, eu acho que vai ser um bate-papo muito legal, porque esse nosso convidado tem uma bagagem enorme no mundo dos esportes, até com o Brasil, né? Ele tem uma sinergia muito grande com o Brasil. Como todo estrangeiro, é um grande fã de churrasco, é um grande fã da comida brasileira e da caipirinha também. Então, eu não vou me alongar muito e vou trazer para cá para conversar com a gente Spike Laurie, que é hoje um executivo de um grande VC de esportes, que é a Hero Capital, mas ele já fez parte, trabalhou inclusive comigo na ESL no Brasil e pelo mundo inteiro. Então, welcome, Spike.
Hello, hi, Leah. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, you understood all my introduction, right?
I got caipirinha, and that was good. Then I knew I was in the right place.
All right.
I'm sorry to your audience that they have to put up with my English. I hope that it's good enough.
Nah, don't worry. I was just telling them about how important it is for us to have this show today, and to have this exchange and point of view of, not because we've been talking about only with local executives and local brands and the players in the region. So it would be great for us to start having this interchange exchange of information on how the global market sees Brazil, what's happening overseas, and so on. And for that, it's great that you accepted our invitation.
Yeah, no, thank you. I've been very privileged in my career to be able to come to Brazil. I think it's such an incredible country, and to have been able to do some business there. Well, at least, get things off the ground until I could hand over to you, Leo, at least, and do the real business could start. But it's hopefully I can offer you some insight.
But let's start even before that. So talk a little bit more about you, Spike. Where do you come from, and how did you end up on esports and doing the things that you do now, being well known as a articulator and businessman from this scene?
Good question. I started about 8 years ago in the business of esports. I started at Warner Brothers, marketing traditional video games, so things like Batman: Arkham Knight, Shadow of Mordor, Mad Max, Mortal Kombat, and I've been a gamer my whole life. I've been playing Counter-Strike back in the early 2000s. I was one of my best friends as a kid at school was actually someone I met online, and back then, I was 12, 13 years old. This was in 1999, which was very early to have a relationship like that in your early teens back then, and that was on a game called Ultima Online. And so I've always been very connected to video games. They've always been a really important part of escapism for me, and so I came from actually a production background, video production, theatre production, and advertising. And I went to Warner Brothers and just got stuck in. And very quickly, I was able to bring this new paradigm called esports which 8 years ago, while it has been around for a long time, people like yourself, Leo, and Ralph, who've been doing this for a very long time, it really started to have a bit of a resurgence in the games industry itself. League of Legends had become a big hit, and the mainstream games industry was starting to understand what esports was before it hadn't. And so I was this young kid in the office at Warner who understood esports. What is this thing? And I was very lucky. I got to evangelize the benefits of esports, which are, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but ultimately it's about engagement marketing. It's about engaging your player base. Free to play again was another big, when the free to play model came in, that was another big important moment for esports, and the acquisition, retention, monetization business model, which is now ubiquitous.
Expanding the lifetime of a title, right?
Absolutely, because if you think about it, back 10 years ago, the model was you buy a game, it's $50, you play the game, that's it. And the levers that the game studios had was the price pulse. So you do, the game comes out $50, after 3 months, you drop it down to $30, and that's how you would sell your games. Then came the season pass. And if you remember back earlier with the season pass, it was Oblivion, I think, at the time. The content was even on the disc. So you bought the disc and the content was on the disc, but then you paid an extra $20 to have access to a new map or a new character or a new game mode, an extended story. Mm-hmm. And that was the business model. So now you went from $50 to $70 per customer. Then after that came DLC, downloadable content. So not only would you could buy individual pieces and they would add up to $30, or you could buy the season pass that was $20. Now you're making $80. But at the same time as that was happening with the traditional boxed games, you had the free-to-play model of games like League of Legends, where you could or MMOs. I worked on Lord of the Rings Online at the time. Another great example. Yes. You realize that your lifetime value of a customer, you have whales that are paying thousands of dollars for skins and content and rare things, and your lifetime value of a player is now $150, $200. And so now it's evolved. Like in just 10 years, the business model has gone bam, 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 bam. Where now, if anyone here plays Call of Duty, Leo and I are big fans, and we were just talking about it. You can pay $60 for the box product, another $30 for the battle pass, another $5 to $10 per item in the store is MTX. So you have game, DLC, MTX. You have it all. And now, the game's been out for probably, 2 months? And I think, Leo, you and I are probably a good $120, $130 in.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that's not atypical. And then you have, I'm sorry, I'm on a tangent here, I apologize. But now you look at what Google's doing with Stadia. Now it's a subscription model. So the business of video games is continually to be tweaked, and esports has always been that kind of engagement piece in the middle. Anyway, I digress. So I went from Warner Brothers to managing Mortal Kombat, the esports program for Mortal Kombat, and I was working with ESL very closely at the time, who, as many people will know, was the sort of the number one esports tournament organizer in the world. They had just been acquired by Modern Times Group as we were getting into the third season of Mortal Kombat, and actually one of the things we did, which was one of the first times it happened in the industry, was I created a skin with NetherRealm, the studio, called Blue Steel Sub-Zero. And I remember having this battle back and forth with the studio because they didn't want to make a new skin. So what we ended up doing is we made a color swap of Scorpion. We took the gold Scorpion from the collector's edition, we color swapped it to make it blue, called it Blue Steel Sub-Zero, and we sold it. And it was $1 each. And all the money from that went to fund the next season of Mortal Kombat Pro League. So it was almost trying to create a self-sustaining model for funding the tournaments through the sale ecosystem. Of skins. But again, it was very, at the time, it wasn't easy to do. These days, it's all very, everyone does it, and it's all really very well ironed out.
Yeah, but they're international, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, international is a perfect example of the power of of what esports can do, not just from a engagement mechanic, but from a crowdfunding mechanic too. And so I joined ESL at that time when they got the MTG acquisition. I was the joint managing director of ESL in the UK. Started with that. We went from a team of 3 or 4 to a team of 25. We built a studio. We got a sort of a business model up and running, James and I. And then we for some reason they thought that I would do well in Brazil. They obviously thought I could do with a tan. And so I went out to Brazil and started doing the same thing. And at the time, it was fascinating because we did. I don't know if you remember, Leo, but we ran the Pro League out there in Ibirapuera.
Ibirapuera, yes.
Which was crazy. I think ESL is a German company, and the talent there is fantastic. But you take a very well-oiled German machine of how to do shows and events and what's expected, and you bring them out into Brazil, into a government half-run Quango stadium with it's a very different world. We had no air conditioning in the studio for the
terrible infrastructure. Yeah.
A week before there was a storm and the electricity broke in the studio we had, which was a garage in Mocha, and those were really fun days because it was very rock and roll. And yeah, even learning about the customs in and out, bringing equipment in, the amount of equipment that we had to bring in to just make things work. And I mean, it's a gray area whether we should have been doing that or not. So it was a fascinating learning curve for this well-oiled, slick German production team to learn about. Here you are in Brazil, no air conditioning, electricity's gone down. We've got to do this big show, and it was probably it's the best, most electric show I'd ever been at, and it was high stress. Everyone was stressed. I remember as well. We had we had Machine and Henry G on the casting desk, and the cameraman kept walking in front of the camera while they were live on air. He didn't it wasn't the camera, it was like a guy, a kit basher, but he just kept walking, didn't notice, didn't care, and it's on the broadcast, this guy walking, and they're like, what the fuck are you doing? But once they saw the stadium, once they saw the energy of the crowd, the surges, and I still remember bringing Escar through the right through the middle of the stadium, just the people, the energy. They got it straight away. They said, this is why we're here in Brazil. This is why the fan base is so important. Nowhere have I seen such an incredible energy and an incredible crowd. And I've spoken a lot, Lee. I apologize, but you got me. No. You brought back some good memories.
This is your space, man. This is for you. And I of course have very fond memories also. And because the day that the Pro League was happening in Brazil, I was already hired by ESL. So I had, before going to the event, I had the final lunch with Ralph and with Craig and the other guys, and we were agreeing on my on me coming to ESL. So, but I went to the event as a guest because I didn't do anything. I didn't do any planning at all. So it was you and the guys from MCI and Moacir and the other guys, everybody that was there. And so I was there for the ride. And yes, like you said, even though with all the difficulties, and I saw the backstage and everything, oh my God, it was crazy because ESL really had to build all the infrastructure and technology and everything for the event to happen. And but still, it was an amazing show, and we had the great atmosphere, and the crowd was wild because, of course, an event of that magnitude, and the boys, the Brazilian boys that at the time was representing SK, right? And went against Cloud9. And even though they lost, the Brazilian crowd was still very passionate. They cheer for the champions. It was a very respectful atmosphere. And like you said, and it was crazy because we went from that to in 2018 with the ESL one in Belo Horizonte, already with a very different structure and very different way to perform the show. And from day one, when we decided to do the show, and the same day that the Brazilian soccer team was playing on the World Cup, and everybody was like, "Leo, you're crazy! Come on, how did you come up with this?" And we had 10,000 people at the stadium, and going wild and showing why the Brazilian audience is one of the best in the world. And I remember that the same guys, Machine and the other guys, they were so emotional about the crowd. And at the last day, they were all wearing the Brazilian soccer jersey at the casting desk. And I think that they never did that anywhere. So it was like a very unique thing. And but great memories. So we had that. We have you starting the company in Brazil. So you had the Pro League, and of course you stayed a little bit longer until I stepped in. But you mentioned something that I wanted to talk about it. So because you were brought in to maybe do something about the whole region, right? So LATAM. So what was the difficulty, or what was your take on to decide to, no, guys, we need to focus in Brazil because LATAM, I don't know, it's complicated or it's just too big?
Well, I think with anything you do, focus it always comes down to focus. And, at the time, Giuliano and I, who was, my business partner and, equal when we were setting up ESL Brazil, I think we realized very quickly that we had maybe bitten off more than we could chew. There was a lot that needed to be done. There was a lot of education in general about how to approach things, and there were some esports companies in Brazil at the time, but they were still doing it in quite a rock and roll kind of fashion. And so we had to really, we had to find the people first. We had to find the right team. And we had to then impart that knowledge, and we did that. We had an excellent, a fantastic guy, one of the best guys in the business, a guy called Michael Kiefer, who I'm sure you remember, Leo.
Oh yeah, of course.
Who had been at ESL for
Super
a long
Michael.
time.
Yes.
Knew how everything worked. Was a robot, and did not, he didn't sleep. But he would bring that endemic knowledge from ESL headquarters and instill that in the team that we found. And it took us a long time to find the right people. I don't know what your feelings are on this, Leo, but I remember we went through quite a high turnover. A lot of people didn't get it or couldn't figure it out, or they're just a cultural fit. I think things in Brazil are culturally quite different to the way things might happen in Europe, for example, or at least in the Anglosphere and in Germany. And but I think that, so there was a high churn, and it took us a long time to find the right people, and that therefore delayed things a little bit. And that was actually the reason why we needed the right managing director at the time, and why we ended up settling on you, because we knew that you got it, you understood it, you had this culture, you understood the culture that was needed, and were able to go out and do that in a way that me as a gringo couldn't do, for example.
Yeah, but it was still very difficult, because I remember that I joined, we had, I think at the time, 8 people working with you at ESL in the office there, because MCI did all the back office stuff. So talking about only the production people, it was 8 people. I quickly changed to 25 people, and then of course I had to move a lot of people from place to place. And I think that it was also really early stages regarding on the actual plans for the company in Brazil, right? Because we had the nationals that we needed to produce, and apart from that, it was much more waiting for the international IPs or the things to land in Brazil, or the need for having the productions in Brazil. And I remember also that there was a big difference while ESL all around the world was doing something more like building the business offices, the marketing and sales offices. In Brazil, that didn't work, so we had to establish ourselves as a production house, have everybody on board, because otherwise it will be too expensive, and there was so much knowledge that we will be losing. So it's a different way to operate, and that of course also was kind of hard in the beginning for the adaptation with the Germany and Brazil. But in the end, ESL is still a very strong brand. I think they're still trying to find their local flavor. But of course, we can't deny that they are masters on doing these big arenas and big ecosystem around more on Counter-Strike and Dota, right? Because they have a great relationship and great experience.
Yeah. No, I think that's the same with any brand. You know, brands, it's very hard for brands to be truly global. And when a brand does become truly global, it loses a little bit of the magic about it. And, you know, a great example, Coca-Cola, you know, household name. But when I'm in Brazil, I don't drink Coca-Cola. I drink Guarana Antarctica.
Guarana Antarctica, yes, almost there.
I love it. I can't get enough of it. I love it. Brilliant drink, but you just don't get that anywhere else. So, but yeah, and fantastic for you that you know that from that experience and building BBL and everything, that you know we all stand on the shoulders of giants, as the saying goes, and we're always learning and always moving forward. And if I went back and was doing it again today, you know, 5 years later, I would approach it very differently. I think you know, you don't always get things 100% right. And
definitely, it was such a big challenge even for myself. So if I could go back from day one with ESL and already having my partners, so like Nando and Thomas and Michelle and the others by my side, of course it will be a whole different story also, because that's where really we thrive with the BBL. So we got the idea and we got the way that ESL was working in one piece of the ecosystem, and we brought in a whole bunch of new stuff with our different markets that we come. So Nando coming from advertising, and Thomas coming from finances and banking, and Michelle from production, and all the others. And now everything makes sense all together, and that's what we're bringing to the market. But talking about the market, Spike, I think that there's two lines of topics here that would be great for us to get more deep into it, because you had experience doing the hustling and the selling to companies and brands.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you also had to do your sales to the owners of the ecosystem, which is the publishers, right? So let's start with the publishing. How important are them into this, and how do you navigate, and how do you really found yourself the best way to collaborate and to have them looking at you as the best support and the best allies to develop their business?
Well, look, it's really hard, and you know, as I'm sure people know, you know, my business today is that I work for you know, a venture capital fund, and we invest in businesses, and esports is one of the areas that we like to invest. So I look very critically at the flaws and the strengths of the esports industry, and the biggest flaw, I think for sure, and the black hole that everyone is kind of circling, is intellectual property, the ownership of the intellectual property, which comes down to the game publishers. And there's a saying that I've been trying to get going for a while, but unsuccessfully, where that there by the grace of Valve go we, i.e. the esports industry exists today largely in part because of the open license that Valve has bestowed upon companies like ESL in the past. Blast, ESL, Faceit, the tournament organizers, and Star, has allowed it to exist because they can exploit that IP. And even if you look at League of Legends back in the early 2010s and onwards, the first event at Intel Extreme Masters was League of Legends, right? That stadium esports in the West for esports games was started with the Intel Extreme Masters. Well, it took about 4 or 5 years for Riot Games to pluck that out and say, thank you very much for all the hard work you've done to date. We're going to take it from here, and that's what born the LCS. So I think the problem is for people working in the space, the game publisher is king, and unfortunately, any time, unless you have, even with the best relationship, even with the best value for them, I do worry that, there's the ecosystem is a little bit fragile orbiting the game publishers. I don't know if you agree with that or not, Leo.
I agree, but why is that?
Well, because look at Bobby Kotick's a fantastic example at Activision. Activision doesn't see itself as a games company. It sees itself, in my opinion, as a Disney, as a worldwide mega entertainment corporation. And it wants to be a Disney. And the only way you get there is by very tight control of your intellectual property. You don't let other people use it or abuse it without your very strict permission, and break that out. Because so Bobby wants to, I think, build into a Disney. And therefore, if you look at the Overwatch League, look at the Call of Duty World League, these are franchised leagues where even the team names have to be controlled and intellectual property owned by Activision Blizzard, because it wouldn't work for them to have a Fnatic or an SK or a MIBR to be a part of that ecosystem, because they don't own it, and so they have to own every single piece of it, and that's a problem. I think for businesses, for teams, for owners.
It's right there, right? It was, well, now you're back in Europe, but when Overwatch League started, it was on your backyard, right, on Burbank. So seeing there live and seeing what was happening, what was your take on it? So it's something that it's growing. This is the model, in your opinion, and
I think a few of us have always been very skeptical of the Activision Blizzard model. I think for 2 reasons. One, the franchise model is a difficult model. It doesn't allow, and it doesn't allow teams to come up. It doesn't tell that zero to hero story in the same way that Counter-Strike does. It's very hard for talent to rise up because there aren't enough intermediary leagues, because they're not allowed to run, to allow players to come up to the top. And the players at the top aren't 100% incentivized to win. The teams aren't incentivized to win. There's no relegation. If you lose every season, it doesn't matter. You're still in the league. And I think that's a problem. And then the second thing is the consolidation of sponsorship rights. If you only have if you have a vertically aligned sponsorship channel with only official leagues and franchise teams, well, that doesn't allow you to grow the pie of esports. That makes you a bigger slice, but doesn't allow you to grow the pie. Whereas if you look at the sponsorship opportunities that are in Counter-Strike, if Adidas sponsors Blast, then Nike can sponsor ESL and Puma can sponsor Faceit. If BMW sponsors Fnatic, then Mercedes can sponsor another team or another event. You create a very horizontal ecosystem which grows much quicker than a top-down controlled vertical ecosystem like Overwatch or Call of Duty, for instance. Okay,
yeah, but it's becoming well known already, and that's where, for instance, like where we navigate is that we know that the publishers they when it comes to their official esports program, they tend to control it and to do all the production, the planning, and they really control all the aspects of it. Sometimes they do a spin-off, or they do something that they offer to other companies to support. But there's a whole array of content creation and of shoulder content that they allow companies to develop their products, something related to the weekly shows or the highlights or things that are happening in between in the content of their official matches that it's still open for companies like ours to negotiate, right? So there's still some room, and it's not like it's 100% of the companies controlling their esports shows.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm probably playing devil's advocate a little bit here. One of the great analogies that I love is esports is a little bit like the semiconductor business, making processors. Back in the day, there were lots of different companies, Sun Microsystems, Apple, Intel, AMD, all making different processors and each having its own architecture. But now it's kind of aggregated to Intel because it's very hard to do it right and to do it at scale. And so, actually up until this year, MacBooks have used Intel processors. Everybody's using the same kind of processor. So I almost think of esports production and esport, the business of esports, a little like that. There have been publishers in the past who have gone and taken things in-house. Then they realize actually it's really expensive to do things in-house, and it's not the most economical way of doing things, because you need to have, and Overwatch League's a perfect example. The vision that Nate Nanza outlined at the beginning of Overwatch League was that every city would have its own home studio, and that the teams would fly from city to city playing each other home and away games.
Yes.
Now, that's a very, very expensive endeavor. The Burbank studio, I don't think Blizzard even has the Burbank studio anymore, because I think it's too expensive. I need to double check that. But running all those studios is far too expensive and economical. So what's easier? It's very easy to hire out these services to specialist companies who can scale up and down depending on the workload and the number of productions.
Yeah, but it's funny because we can take that's kind of the global take on this situation. But it's funny that when you go to the local vision, there are some opportunities. So while there are challenges on the global scale, there are very good opportunities on the local scale, because, like you said, while when we talk about the Riot Games leagues, official leagues, so the LCS and the other leagues in Europe, they maybe the American league, they are really tight, or they're really close to the main office, and the main office do everything. They do the pricing, and they do the global deals for the leagues and everything in regards to sponsorships and brands. But when it comes down to the local offices, while they also do that, they are kind of open for us to try and support and pitch in with some leads and some representation to help them bring more brands into the table. So while we do not join the TO side, where the production side, that it's done by them, like I said, there are opportunities for us to operate and support them, support their vision, doing other types of services. So,
and this, I think, is the strength of the Brazilian market.
Yeah,
you are able to incrementally add both sponsorship revenue, media rights revenue to a game publisher's bottom line, because the Brazilian language is a different language, so the English content, the English broadcast doesn't cut it.
Yep.
And so for them to produce a Brazilian language show, it's actually much easier for them to just say, BBL, you guys are the experts here. This is our content calendar for the year. Can you please support it? And in return, you can say to them, yeah, we're happy to resell it, but we want co-sales, or we want to, we're going to bring an incremental sponsorship to you as well, which is going to offset their costs and becomes a much more profitable endeavor for you. For the Brazilian brands, it's actually perfect, because they then get to have a really good relationship with you. They get to create authentic content, being part of creation of authentic content in a really smart way. And they leverage the relationships that you already have and the expertise you have. So you're totally right. When it comes to local markets, this is absolutely the opportunity for esports, and that's Brazil. And also, what's the population of Brazil? 200 million.
Yes,
that's very different from a Portugal or a Spain or a Italy. This is a very big country.
it is.
With a very engaged user base. So it's a no-brainer. You're actually in a fantastic position.
Yeah, and then you of course you already spoke a little bit about the next topic, which will be of course the brands, right, and their participation, their role into the business. So, Spike, really plainly speaking, why do brands need to be in this ecosystem? So why they need to really pay attention and take a closer look and invest in this business?
Just look at the numbers. The games industry now is bigger than the film and the music industry combined. The number of gamers is huge, and it is growing year on year. And those gamers are young, and they are typically millennials, or I think Zoomers now. I can't keep up with the latest language. They don't watch TV. They are not out in looking at billboards. They're not reading newspapers or magazines. They are watching content on YouTube and Twitch, and predominantly a lot of their outlet is watching esports content. So if you want to reach this generation of people, you have very few choices, and putting it into out of home or TV advertising or magazine or newspaper advertising like you would have done 5 years ago, it is not going to move the needle. So very simply, that is why a brand should be involved with games and esports.
In your opinion, which is tell me about a brand that you think that did a great are doing or did a great work into the esports ecosystem.
Well, that's a great question. I'm a big fan of I'm quite a big fan of the team sponsorships, and I think there've been some really good examples. I think automotive is a very good example of a segment of the industry that it's a very slow buying process, buying a car, and you have an affinity to a brand from a very young age, and you kind of don't know why you have an affinity. If you like Aston Martins, probably because you're a James Bond fan, right? That, or but there are reasons that are kind of intangible a little bit as to why you like certain cars. It's not because of their mile per gallon rating. It's not because of their safety rating. It's not because of it's a particular shade of red. And these automotive brands know that if they want to persuade the buyers of the future, they need to start now building those bridges with gamers who are going to be the buyers of the future. And so I think it's very smart of brands like Mercedes and BMW to be looking at team sponsorship and event sponsorship and starting to show off, when the teams turn up in a brand new S-Class Mercedes, that's, it's starting to make those links for them. So I think I'm really happy that industries like automotive are now moving into esports and gaming. I think they've been too slow, but now you can see that the big companies are coming in. Many more are coming in and following. And I get calls every week from people saying, hey, we're a brand, or we represent a brand, or an agency. Can you help us position for esports? Because we need to reach this audience.
Of course, everybody was talking about how great 2020 was supposed to be for esports and gaming. And then, of course, COVID hit. And all around it, of course, big differences around the world on how countries manage to mitigate and to really get out of the lockdown and have the least casualties. And of course, it's a terrible situation. But of course, we're talking about online entertainment, right? And how do you see how is the esports market navigating through this difficult time?
Well, look, everyone I speak to in the business of esports is struggling. A lot of that is because the brands have pulled their sponsorship. So I know team owners who have had 2 or 3 sponsorship deals be put on pause. The big tournament operators and leagues are struggling because of that. So it's difficult. But the flip side to that is, while the day-to-day running of the business has become more difficult, and also people are working, just the basics of having to work from home or things like that, flying teams in. How can you, if there's a travel ban, how can you fly the players that you need to the right place to play on the right time zone or the right server? So there's that. But the macro tailwind for video games in general has been very, very strong. Over the last 3 months, one of the very few performing asset classes has been video games. And if you look at Activision's stock, if you look at EA's stock, if you look at, you see very clearly that these guys are doing very, very well. They are making more revenue than they were before because, rightly so, you can't go to the pub with your friends. You have to play Warzone with your friends, or you have to play Fortnite. You can't you can't be playing in the schoolyard with your school friends. You're on Fortnite instead. So the games industry is doing very, very well from a macro perspective. The business of events is struggling, and hopefully those things will catch up as soon as things return to normal. Although I can't really see that being until a vaccine is found. I think looking at sort of America's numbers, looking at what's happening here in the UK and in Europe, although we have managed to flatten the curve of COVID-19, we have certainly not stopped it, and it is certainly coming back.
Crazy times. But we'll get this around and get back to having the offline events in no time, I'm sure, and the market will catch up, like you said. I was about to push or to go to the topic where you changed, right? So you kind of got out of the esports business. Yes. into the VC business, into the capital and finance business. But of course, you still kept your eyes and your hands into the esports market because, from what I heard, and you can tell me better, of course, Hero is looking and is investing in this business. But I will put this together with the question that came here on the Q&A from John and João Paulo de Andrade, which has said, "Hey, Leo and Spike, hope you're doing well. I'm an investment professional, grew up playing video games, and would love to put these worlds together. You, Spike, as a venture capitalist, what are the current opportunities of investment? What type of business, and how do you evaluate this business?"
Yeah, good. Yeah, great question. So yeah, I've been very, very lucky. An opportunity came up, which was gold dust. To move into venture capital and to work for my childhood hero, who is Ian Livingstone, who is the founder of Hero Capital. He was the man that created Games Workshop and Warhammer. He is the man that created IDOS, Tomb Raider, Lara Croft, the first Lego Star Wars game. And so to be able to work for him was it is a once in a lifetime opportunity. He has launched, run, invested in many very successful game studios, and his criteria, what I've learned so far from Ian is that his first piece of criteria is it fun? And for us, we get to invest in game studios based on, or look at them at least based on, is the game fun? And I think that's it's a super critical thing that's very easy to forget about when you start to think about, cap tables and performance numbers and acquisition metrics and all this sort of stuff. But it really boils down to who is the team? What is the team like? Do you think you can back them? Because ultimately you are backing a team. Is the game fun? And does it have an opportunity to be successful? And do they have a defensible moat? Do they have something special about them which is protectable? And those are really the three criteria that we use when we judge businesses in the games industry. We're a 150 million euro fund, venture capital fund. We do Series A and B investments, which is not sort of early seed or angel investing. It's really for businesses that have, for example, a game studio that's launched a game and now is looking to scale. We believe in European talent, although we invest everywhere. And the reason for that is Europe very strongly over-indexes in video game talent. If you look at the top 100 games, 50 of those were made by European studios like Rockstar, Rocksteady, DICE, Supercell. And what has happened is that European talent gets very quickly emanate into a US publisher or a Chinese conglomerate. And so our rationale is to provide that follow-on funding for game studios to scale and to build out their intellectual property under their own terms without being absorbed into a US or a Chinese conglomerate.
Great. I want to continue with the questions here because we're kind of running to the end of the show. So different topics. So I think that these questions came from while we were discussing the different topics of the show.
Sure.
So, but let's get back to it. So, Spike, you said that's from Diego. Spike, you said that the gaming industry is bigger than music and movie combined. However, the cost of making a game is comparable with making a movie itself. And as the movie business, a game can be a failure or a big success. Do you believe that he put something like the juice of the game or the core of the game's business is between the publisher and the final consumer instead of the development of a new game?
I think it's a really good question, and I would challenge a little bit that games are becoming more and more expensive, especially AAA games. Now you'd be paying 50 million plus more to build a AAA game and then to market it and to publish it. But something like Avengers, for example, again, very, very expensive to make. But when you look at it, actually, if you look at mobile games, for example, they aren't that expensive to make, and you can have really huge hits with those. And it's the game. I agree that the games industry is a hit-driven business, but you can have very simple indie games on Steam or on mobile that are made by 2 or 3 people that are extremely fun, do well, and make money. And so I disagree slightly, but I would say that there are a lot of opportunities for games developers of all shapes, all sizes, all teams to do what they love, to make a game that they want to make, and to share it with the audience and to make money. And with competition in the space now from Steam, Amazon Store, Epic's new store, it's each of those racing to give the developer or the publisher more of a share. I think that's only a good thing for the industry.
Great. Another question here from Fernando is that do you think that there is still some roadblocks and some issues from certain non-endemic brands to sponsor FPS titles? We know that in Brazil we do have, but is it something also global? And what could make the opportunity still with the FPS more attractive?
I think brands spend a lot of time thinking about how they are portrayed, and we've seen that really with Black Lives Matter. We've seen that with Pride. Brands bend over backwards to really curate the way that they are communicating and the way they are speaking to the consumer. And when you take a game like Counter-Strike, which has a theme of terrorism or counter-terrorism, or has blood mechanics, and the shooting of people, I can understand, and I think rightly so, why brands would want to stay away from that. And I think the industry is working extremely hard to change that. The industry is changing. If you look at Overwatch, it was clearly designed with its graphical types, with the backgrounds of the characters to be very, very brand safe. Same with Valorant. It is again it's a cell shaded look. The game publishers understand this. They're wising up to it, and they are actively developing games that are brand safe, to try and attract that, those very safe brands.
Okay. Yeah, it's very difficult. We know that when we reach out to brands here in Brazil, and that some of the more traditional ones, they want to talk about, of course, games like League of Legends or the Supercell games, or other more non-graphical games, because they think that, yes, it's still a safe environment. But it's hard to turn your eyes from the huge audience that Counter-Strike still drives, and games like Free Fire on the mobile drives. And so that's something that I think it's already happening, but it will happen even more, that they will start seeing the games more as media distribution, and not only really paying or giving the only attention to the model or the format that the game is. So I think that there will be a change like this.
And ironically, I know one big game publisher who is careful about which brands are associated with their game, and won't allow Coca-Cola to be associated with their game because of the damage that does to children. So, I think it's actually, what's funny is it's starting to go both ways.
Yeah, and then we saw something like Bud Light. I think it was Bud Light, right, sponsoring Overwatch League. And so I think there are some barriers there are coming down, and but of course there will be a lot of due diligence there and securities to see if this works properly. Yes. I think that we have time for one more question here. Is that, and it goes back to the VC side. So from Mateus, hi, I'm a CEO of a startup that run esports tournaments. I'm preparing my company to harvest investments. Can you explain how you evaluate an opportunity, or how can I better prepare my company? Which is the best points to attract a venture?
Yeah, I love it. Good use of the word harvest. I think that's a good line. Harvest away. I think that, what's ultimately, unfortunately, the business of venture capital comes down to, the venture capital vehicle has to make money for the investors. And that means they expect a certain return on investment. And you need to be savvy of that. And you need to understand that to attract venture capital or seed investment, ultimately, it's going to come down to, can you return the investment that is expected, which is normally 10 times plus. So really think about that, and think about how you could present that to the VC. You have specialist funds like Hero, which are in the games industry. We really understand the business of video games, so we'll get it very quickly. But you also, what else that COVID has done is it has shown the generalist venture capital funds that there's this huge opportunity in games that they don't quite understand. And there's a great opportunity for a lot of startups to talk to those VCs that they wouldn't normally be able to without the COVID situation. And so I think about what I said. Have the right team, show off the team and why you're the best team to do it. Show why what you're doing is fun and how it will bring value to consumers at scale. And show what is defensible about what you're doing, what is that moat, and put those three things within the context of this is where we are today, this is where we're going to be in 5 years, and you can see the opportunity there for a return on investment for the investor. And if you can do that, you should be successful.
Scale is the world, right? So it's really what really makes the difference in turning a company into a very big success.
And unfortunately, the venture capital, one of the problems with it is that perhaps the expectations are too high on companies to make too good returns. And for a lot of for a standard seed size venture capital fund, only one or two of the businesses that they invest in need to become unicorns for the fund to return its money. The other 10, 15, 20 investments might not go anywhere. But in order for that business model to work of the seed investor, they've got to keep trying until they get a hit. And when they get a hit, it returns the whole fund.
Perfect. Spike, we ran out of time on our show. It was a real pleasure having you here, and because we really wanted to give this view of the global market, of the outside market, and how it relates to our Brazilian market. And you really nailed it and brought in a lot of knowledge and insights. So I thank you a lot for that. So if you have a final message to the ones that will listen to our podcast and to the VOD later on, and the people that are here, a message of everything that is happening around the world, but the good thing about our market, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think anyone who is involved in the games industry, we're all incredibly lucky to be part of this incredible industry that is bringing so much entertainment and so much fun to everybody's lives. Just keep up what you're doing. And Brazil, I have so many fond memories of the people, the place, the businesses, the brands, everything. I can't wait to come back, and there's such a great opportunity. So everyone that's in the industry and is listening to this, I think just realize what a great thing we've all got going, and keep pushing forward and making it even better for everybody else.
Great stuff. So, pessoal, obrigado por mais esse episódio, pela audiência aqui na nossa live. A gente sabe, não sei se amanhã, pela questão de que nós vamos até legendar o VOD para poder passar para vocês, mas no mais tardar, quinta-feira, a gente está lançando o VOD e o podcast desse episódio para todos vocês terem acesso e poderem multiplicar aí, mandar, se vocês gostaram, isso para os seus colegas e parceiros. Enfim, nos vemos semana que vem. Foi muito, muito legal essa primeira experiência do nosso primeiro episódio internacional, para a gente poder ter realmente essa visão do que está acontecendo lá fora, de como lá fora vê o Brasil. Então, nos vemos na próxima edição. Pessoal, obrigado pela sua audiência, obrigado pela presença e até semana que vem. Tchau, tchau.